What's a 10/10 book you've read? And then there were none. Fantastically plotted, some great characterization, a truly awful sense of dread, the best mystery novel ever for a reason. The Last Unicorn by Peter S. Beagle. It's a high fantasy story written in 1968, and I've yet to come across another fantasy story that has the same kind of tone, same voice as this one. Maybe a combination of the time period and the author not being off his gourd on LSD like a lot of fantasy written at the time. It's earnest but also self-aware. It acknowledges tropes dealing with unicorns, but not in like a "I'm embarrassed to be telling a story about unicorns so I gotta mock stories about unicorns in my story about unicorns" kind of way. It's humorous and poetic at times, with some just delightfully weird shit like the babbling butterfly. ETA some choice quotes for the curious. Real magic can never be made by offering someone else's liver. You must tear out your own, and not expect to get it back. You pile of stones, you waste, you desolation, I'll stuff you with misery till it comes out of your eyes. I'll change your heart into green grass, and all you love into a sheep. I'll turn you into a bad poet with dreams. She did not look anything like a horned horse, as unicorns are often pictured, being smaller and cloven-hoofed, and possessing that oldest, wildest grace that horses have never had, that deer have only in a shy, thin imitation, and goats in dancing mockery. All quiet on the Western Front remark. It shocked me. I was 18 years old at that time. The needs and fears were the same as I had at that time. If I would have been born 100 years prior, I would have been that young man going into a war that crushes my generation. The Phantom Toll Booth from Norton Jester always stayed with me. The Glass Castle. The Godfather. You thought the film was good? Wait till you've read the book. East of Eden. The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn and Frankenstein. The Count of Monte Cristo. Flores for Algernon. The Brother Karamazov. Lonesome Dove. The entirety of Discworld by Terry Pratchett. Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut. The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. The Good Earth by Pearl S. Buck. Flowers for Algernon. A Gentleman in Moscow. A Thousand Splendid Suns by Khaled Hosseini. It is definitely the book that everyone needs to read. Just trust me. I promise you won't changes all of the point of views about social issues in Eastern with all of this emotions. Holes. King Leopold's Ghost. It's about the King of Belgium's colony in Congo. Heartbreaking, but really good. Red Rising. Love this thread. Okay, a few as I cannot choose one. A Gift of Time by Jerry Merritt. Educated by Tara Westover. Before We Were Yours by Lisa Wingate. Year One by Nora Roberts. A series. The Stand unabridged version. King is a Genius. The Book Thief by Marcus Suzak. Several. But if I had to choose two, Brave New World by Huxley, the capitalist version of 1984, I was just blown away by the book. It felt like it could have been written very recently when in fact it's from the 1930s. The Road by McCarthy. I cried reading this book. Stormlight Archive. Life Before Death. The Stranger. So much in such a small book. Always find something new when I read it. Misery. Stephen King. Had me gripped. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Watership Down. The Kite Runner. I enjoyed reading Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir quite a bit. Ender's Game. Crime Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Degana, by Guy Gabriel K. Amazing marriage of fantasy, altish history, politics, and fleshed-out characters years before A Game of Thrones entered the chat. 100 Years of Solitude. Wool by Hugh Howey. Where the Red Fern Grows. Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy is already mentioned. Probably my favorite book. Everything he writes is amazing. Wind-Up Bird Chronicle and everything else I've read by Haruki Murakami. Also 10/10. I need to revisit both these authors. A Thousand Splendid Suns by Khaled Hosseini. Jitterbug Perfume. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Kankisi. So many. A couple I haven't seen mentioned yet. Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett. Lord of the Rings. The Little Prince. Lamb. Christopher Moore. The Three-Body Problem is the most engrossing book I've ever read. I won't spoil anything, but it's so fucking incredible. Anyone who loves sci-fi will love this series. It is on another level. The Handmaid's Tale, by Margaret Atwood. There are things she does in the book that cannot be replicated in the show. The Shining, The Yellow Wallpaper, The Lovely Bones are some good ones I read this year. Curious George Goes to the Hospital. The Shadows of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. Prince of Tides. Excellent book, but ignore the movie Fried Green Tomatoes. This book is fantastic. Touching, funny, suspenseful, thought-provoking. It has everything. I've read it twice at different ages in my life. Wonderful both times. I recently bought a large type edition for my 107-year-old grandma and she loved it too. She said it made her laugh out loud. My grandma lolled, smiley face, added to add that this movie is also excellent. It doesn't have all the nuances of the book, But Timo the movie and the actors do the book proud. Boy's Life Robert McCammon. Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. A Prayer for Owen Meany. Jane Eyre. House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. All the Light We Cannot See. A Series of Unfortunate Events. The book series is amazing. It may be for children but I love it. Catch-22. To Kill a Mockingbird. Basic choice, I know. I read it in high school and thought it was good, but once I read it again as an adult, I realized how freaking perfect it was. 1 Second After by William R. Forstchen. It is a series about what would occur if an EMP were to go off and the fallout after. The Jungle Book by Rudyard Kipling. Read it yourself, read it to your kids. A Short History of Nearly Everything. Bill Bryson. So fascinating and expertly written. The City of Ember series. I have read it at least 5 times and always discover something new. Kite Runner is not only the most well-written book but also one of the most beautiful stories. It's a kid's book, but I read The Phantom Tollbooth cover to cover at least 10 times as a kid. His Dark Materials. Things Fall Apart. Can't recommend it enough. The Talisman. Stephen King and Peter Straub. Good Omens. Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett. Norse Mythology by Neil Gaiman. Short read. Fun myths stories. I would suggest the audiobook though. I did both and enjoyed the audiobook more. He is a great narrator. Also, does listening to an audiobook count as reading? Hyperion by Dan Simmons. The Road. I had some crazy dreams after reading this book. It stuck with me for weeks, maybe as long as a month. 1984. Treasure Island. Silence of the Lambs. Percy Jackson. The Road. I watched the movie first, then heard the book was more grim, and oh boy did they tone down the most grotesque things from the book. Maybe Das Parfum Perfume by Patrick Suskind. H.G. Wells. The Time Machine. The Holographic Universe. Michael Talbot. The Beach. Alex Garland. Shantaram Gregory. David Roberts. Fight Club. Chuck Palahniuk. The First Captain Underpants book. At the time I was 6 when I read it. I really liked the flip-o-ramas. Best book, would recommend it. Lord of the Rings. Devil in the White City. It's historical, but written like fiction. It's just so fascinating and chock full of historical details that make you say huh. I didn't ever think about that. For example, how big a deal the first Ferris wheel was. Ian M. Banks. Player of Games. The Stand. Just read it recently. Incredible book. The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. More. Terry Pratchett. East of Eden by Steinbeck. Red Rising. Pierce Brown. Anybody that I've gotten to read the first book in the series has continued to read the following books. May not be everybody's cup of tea, but it's quite captivating to me. The Firm by John Grisham. The movie adaptation is mediocre though. The World According to Garp. A Gentleman in Moscow by Immortals. Well, let's see. There are the timeless classics. 1984 Catcher in the Rye. Catch-22 One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich Frankenstein. Then there are some slightly newer ones on their way to being classics. Wizard of Earthsea. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. A Wrinkle in Time. Stardust. iRobot. Watership Down. And finally the ones that nobody seems to have heard of. Off the Mat. Coyotes. Nonfiction by Ted Conover. The Practice Effect. Awfully appetizing. Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. The Belgariad series by David Eddings. Ender's Game. Pity here has never been a movie made from this book. 1984. The Way of Kings. War of the Worlds by Smiley Face. Needful Things. I liked On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. The Brothers Karamazov. The Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway. Or The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. The Great American Novels. Anything Timothy Zahn. Hyperion. The Fall of Hyperion blew my mind. Was not easy to get into, though. The 5th season by N.K. Jemisin. Ender's Game. The Stand in the Dark Tower. The Jungle by Upton Sinclair. A great novel written in 1906 based on wage slavery. Sinclair was a journalist who went undercover in a meat-packing plant and then wrote about it from the mostly poor and immigrant workers' perspective. East of Eden. Stranger in a Strange Land by Robert Heinlein. Old Man's War Barefoot. The Name of the Wind. P. Rothfuss and Mistborn Saga. B. Sanderson. The Unbearable Lightness of Being. The Stand by Stephen King. Best end of the world book ever. The Watchers by Dean Koontz. It has horror, romance, action, and when you're done you will feel sorry for the monster and want that doggone broken by Laura Hillenbrand. The World War II history of planes is amazing. What he went through is unbelievable. Gary Paulson Hatchett.
I hope you all are doing well, and thanks for watching. Don't forget to like if you enjoyed this video. If you have something to say critically or otherwise, leave a comment. And if you enjoy this content, don't forget to subscribe to see more of it. I hope you all have wonderful and fulfilled lives.